Hello friend. Let's talk for a moment about what's real. About what's real and what's not. And whether or not you can tell the difference. You probably think of psychology as scientific, but it isn't. You probably don't know that while 97% of original studies in psychology produce statistically significant results, that number drops to 36% in replicated studies. In simple words, most study results can't be reproduced in psychology. It's worse when you consider the 1973 experiment conducted by Dr. David Rosenhan of Stanford University. Rosenhan and 7 other healthy individuals faked auditory hallucinations to gain admission into mental hospitals in order to test the validity of psychiatric diagnoses. Once admitted, Rosenhan and his volunteers acted normally, but 7 were diagnosed with schizophrenia and the 8th was diagnosed with manic depressive psychosis. None of the 8 were identified by psychiatrists and staff members as faking mental illness, even though other patients identified them as imposters. Their average stay was 19 days. Only when they began taking antipsychotic medications were the volunteers released from the hospitals, with each volunteer flushing the medication down the toilet. What Rosenhan and his volunteers witnessed was simple: abusive hospital attendants and psychologists who were unable to issue a correct diagnosis or distinguish between the sane volunteers in Rosenhan's study and truly insane patients. In a follow-up study after the original experiment's results were publicized, a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send more imposters. He sent no one, but the hospital identified 41 out of 193 patients as imposters, and suspected an additional 42 patients of being imposters. The diagnostic processes of psychology were therefore useless to determine who was mentally ill and who was mentally healthy. In 1973, Rosenhan published his results in the journal Science under the title On Being Sane in Insane Places. Rosenhan's experiment raises obvious questions. How many psychiatric diagnoses are valid? How many people have been falsely diagnosed or wrongfully committed to institutions to be abused by psychologists in attendance? How much uses psychology to the mentally ill, and to society in general, when Rosenhan's experiment and the lack of reproducible results in psychological studies clearly illustrates that there are significant problems with the diagnostic process and criteria, as well as the methodology of psychology as a discipline? What is the real purpose of psychology, given these facts? Hello friends. Let's talk about control, and those who won't be controlled because they believe their individual prerogatives outweigh what social scientists believe to be the greater good. In the minds of a social scientist, force or coerce virtue is good. Forced compliance, even towards methods and outcomes that are ultimately proven wrong, is warranted. The experts will tell you what to do, and you should do it. The competence of those telling you how to act or what to do is never the issue. They are the experts, and you are not to question their expertise even when it is obviously lacking. That's why Dutch social psychologist Diederik Stapel evaded detection as he fabricated data in at least 55 papers and 10 doctoral dissertations. As Stapel put, "I didn't do strange stuff. I never said let's do an experiment to show that the earth is flat. I always checked, this may be by a cunning manipulative mind, that the experiment was reasonable, that it followed from the research that had come before, that it was just this extra step that everybody was waiting for." Just like the psychologists and psychiatrists couldn't tell the difference between the sane volunteers in Rosenhan's experiment and the genuinely insane individuals who populated mental institutions, the community which reviewed Stapel's work failed to detect his fraud, only to be exposed when 2 students later found the fraud. The truth is that social sciences are neither social nor scientific. The overall replicability of studies and experiments across the social science disciplines is lower than 50%. Fraud isn't detected if the researcher in question simply adapts his research to the research that came before, while ensuring that his research generates what Stapel called the extra step everybody was waiting for. Dr. John Ioannidis published a paper entitled Why Most Published Research Findings Are False in 2005. in which he asserted that the false positive rate in scientific studies exceeded 50%. Even those who refuted Ioannidis' findings, such as biostatistician Jeff Leake, were forced to concede that false positive rates in published research varied by one's definition of most and false. This would ultimately mean that the definitions of most and false were subjective even in the eyes of those defending scientific studies and their validity. This is about controlling the uncontrolled. It's about giving subjective and often baseless statements the imprimatur of scientific legitimacy. Trust the science, we're told. But is the science even science? Is it simply a means of getting you to act? Out of a misplaced trust in an expert class that is expert in perception only? Is there much difference between the institutions that govern men in the 18th century, such as the monarchy and the church, and the institutions that govern us now under the cover of scientific legitimacy? Out of the 18th and 19th centuries, the social sciences grew in response to the upheaval and overthrow of monarchies, churches, and an emerging religion of humanity. As the father of sociology Auguste Comte put it, the religion of humanity is the religion of common consent, and the rather naive idea that common or mass consent cannot be manipulated or controlled. Are you sane in an insane place? Or are you insane for rejecting the sanity being marketed to you in the form of mRNA therapies and conventional medical wisdom? Are you controlled? To recap, most published research is false. A good bit of false research is fraudulent. This is done to control and manipulate you and your perspective, by giving you trusted voices with credibility who are lying. The vast majority of scientists and academics don't catch the lies. Instead, they cite the lies.